But here's Joe Aribo, a slip from Tutan. Aribo! A bolt from the blue! Joe Aribo!
Hi there, and welcome to everybody watching the live This Is Ibrox Friday Night Bulletin. Tonight I'm joined by Dylan Brand. How are you doing today, Dylan, on Friday the 13th?
Yeah, all good, surprisingly, mate. Yeah, it's good to be back on.
That's it. And how are you today as well, Patrick?
Yeah, good. Glad to be on for the first time in the new year. Luckily, we're not playing on a Friday the 13th. We got to wait till Sunday, but hopefully no spooks there. And everything goes as plain sailing. Albeit, I don't think the last time we played Aberdeen could be described as plain sailing. But nonetheless.
Yeah, I said I'm going to the game on Sunday, and I'm absolutely not hoping for a repeat of that. I don't think I could take that again, especially in a League Cup semi-final. But as always, in the wonderful world of Rangers, we've got plenty to talk about. When I did this on Wednesday, I thought when I was doing the Friday one that we'd be coming on and have a signing to discuss, but we've not. So we'll just do a bit more speculation. On tonight's show, we'll discuss the Beale press conference. We could actually do a whole pod on that, to be honest with you. Love that we're getting these sort of 20, 25-minute press conferences coming out of Beale nowadays. We'll talk about the TAV press conference as well, and I thought it was really good to see Adam Devine, so maybe give him a wee shout too. Have a look at some of the transfers, especially if we've got Patrick on the show. So you guys, if you get any questions, anything like that, I'll direct them at Patrick, and I'm sure he'll do his best to give you a good answer. And obviously, we'll look ahead to the League Cup semi-final against Aberdeen. I think maybe I will talk about this patron thing as well, because it's quite new, because I'm not logging in for my work, and I've just seen a lot of people going on Twitter and some not so happy people on it. But everybody that watches this show, when I'm hosting, I always like to do a wee on this day. I'll come to you on this first, Dylan, if that's all right. And I was really, really glad I got to talk about this, because this game in my mind stands out so much. I remember this game like it was yesterday. So Rangers defeated Dundee United 5-0 in Walter Smith's return after the Paul Le Guen disaster, or experiment, if you want to call it that. We had four goal scorers that day, with Charlie Adam, who scored an absolute screamer from about 30 yards out. We had Chris Burke scored one, Boyd scored two, and Barry Ferguson scored the other. What's your thoughts on having Walter Smith back at the club at this point, and what was your memories of Sir Walter returning?
Yeah, quite tricky, because obviously after Paul Le Guen leaving, there wasn't really much hope. I don't remember there being much candidates for the job, a wee strong candidates. So to kind of hear Walter Smith's link back, and obviously eventually coming back, it was quite exciting, because obviously you sort of grew up at that point, to sort of hearing about how he won his 9 in a row. Or at least being involved in 9 in a row, rather. Yeah, I was pretty excited. I was quite intrigued to see what he can do, because obviously in his first spell he had lots of money to invest into the squad with. He can buy the likes of Brian Laudrup and Paul Gascoigne, whereas this time round it's more of a shoestring budget, plus if he can sort of, to say the least. But no, he just sort of started the game. The Dundee United game was sort of him starting as a means to go on, although we went another trophy-less season when he returned. You can sort of see the strong foundations he built. I think that January he brought in the likes of Kevin Thompson and Davy Weir, and they proved to be very good additions to the squad over the years. So, yeah, I was quite excited, and Walter Smith's second spell more or less cemented him as a legend, in my opinion. Got very fond memories of it. So, yeah, very, very good memories from myself.
Yeah, just that was for a wee bit of background in that. That was kind of when I was getting into football a wee bit, and I think it was the first time I'd been to Ibrox quite a few times on the Paul Le Guen, and it was so terrible sometimes. And then just to have that, and I just remember that, like, a lot of older people that I knew that supported Rangers, they were just like, it's fine, like Walter Smith's coming back, so don't worry about it. And then that first game, we go out and absolutely pump Dundee United. I mean, we annihilated in that game 5-0. It could have been more, and I was just like, oh, that's fine. That's the Walter Smith effect right there. But yeah, just want to say before we crack on, hi to Millwall Ranger. Normally don't give shout outs on this, but that's us. We're truly international now. We can score Canada off the list that we're in. Patrick, I'll start off with you on this, just to come to the Michael Beale press conference, as we touched on earlier. It was another stagger, a bit of an epic again. Lots to dissect and take away from it. Maybe start on the initial news that he was asked about some transfers. It's really interesting how open he is on some of these things. He talks about, he said, my bit's done. That makes sense. Talked about there being maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 players coming in. We've seen the news about Cantwell with Norwich, and that he's accepted that he's going away. What's your thoughts on players that we could potentially bring in and Cantwell specifically?
No, I mean, first in terms of the sort of press conference approach, I'm a big fan of it. For the longest time, it seemed that we're sort of cloaked in a sort of cloak of darkness, specifically about injuries. That was the biggest gripe we had. It felt that for every injury we got, which seemed bordering on every week throughout the early autumn and late summer, we would be told some sort of very vague estimate when we'd be back. Whereas now I think we got injury updates on 6 or 7 of the players, with almost all coming back or expected to be back by late January. Mm-hmm. And then obviously Yilmaz and Lawrence taking a bit longer, but there's light at the end of the tunnel for both of them as well. We have some sort of discrepancy and explanation for when they'll be back. Obviously, that doesn't mean that it's linear and they're going to not face any rehab or setbacks, but I enjoy that specifically. And the transfer stuff is quite funny because it's a lot of journalists and Beale as the manager jousting against each other to try and put words in each other's mouths. You see him saying, yes, what you guys are printing, or about long lines, Cantwell seems quite accurate. So he's not trying to play all his cards, but he's trying to play up to them, to give them some headlines, make it a bit fun, which I enjoy. Obviously, I would rather that we just announce the players that we sign, but you can't rush that process. I think a lot of our past failures perhaps have been without us doing our due diligence, rushing the process, and perhaps trying to appease the fans by getting a decision done correctly, as opposed to getting the correct decision done, as that's what's sort of the be all end all in terms of importance. Cantwell is probably the name that's been mentioned the most. Davies was also mentioned alongside him. That hasn't been as sort of fervent as the Cantwell stuff, which was only let ablaze when Wagner, the Norwich manager, said that he doesn't really have a future at Norwich per se. So that's kind of as close as we can get to being like he's going to leave in January. It's the sort of move, at least in my opinion, is totally dependent on how much we have to pay his wages, and if we get him in January or in the summer, and for how much, because he is out of contract in June, which means we could technically get him for free now. But obviously, Beale said in the press conference that he would rather bring a player in 6 months prior than bed in. So that seems to be the sort of, if you're going to make a bet on who's going to arrive, it'll be Cantwell on a negotiated fee of probably $1 million or around that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We'll definitely touch on more of the transfer stuff later on in the podcast, but I think that's a good wee insight. He's been. I don't know how I feel sometimes about the honesty, because it's now everybody's going to be 100% certain that we are going to sign Cantwell, and if it doesn't appear, then I dread to think what will happen, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Another point that was raised, Dylan, in the press conference, and I thought this was interesting. It talks about Rangers having a bit of a British core. I'm assuming he's alluding to guys like Stephen Davis, the captain of Northern Ireland, John Lundstrom, and having Ryan Jack in there, John Suter. Obviously, we've got a lot of English-based players as well. I thought it was an interesting question in a press conference. How necessary do you think it is to have something like that in modern football nowadays? Is it necessary to have a British core in the team?
Personally, I don't think it's necessary. I think obviously for a club, when you think of the most successful sides, you do sort of think of it's more likely like a British-based players. So whether you think about 9 in a row, Walter Smith's second tenure, stuff like that. So, and even if you go back further to Barcelona Bears, so like the most successful Rangers teams have always kind of had a pretty space to it. Do I think that's necessary? Do I think that will mean it will get success? Not necessarily, because if you can remember, Warburton's squad was mostly pretty spaced, and obviously he wasn't able to achieve much. Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's necessary. I think as long as you just got like the right attitude,
Yeah.
the desire to sort of give 100% for the club, then it doesn't really matter personally for me where they come from, just as long as they have that desire and that effort on their part.
Yeah, I wonder if it was just one of these questions it was asked just because we have been linked with so many British-based players, this window especially. But I'll stick with you on the next question, Dylan. It was levelled at Michael Beale how important it was that the guys won the Scottish Cup last year and how that will help them going forward into this game. I'll ask you the exact same question. It's something something we've already talked about several times already. Walter Smith was very, very keen on bringing guys that had already won stuff outside of the squad, bringing them in, and it was important. Do you think it does count for something here that they've got that experience of winning and it can only make them a bit hungrier for more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our record in cup competitions the last few years just hasn't been good enough. So therefore, I don't think we can afford the luxury of just passing up on a final or a trophy rather. Beale's right in that last season's Scottish Cup win sort of gives them the confidence that they can do it, or rather, they have the ability to go on and achieve cup success. And it's quite easy to forget that most of these guys haven't really won much. I mean, you sort of look at players such as Dav, Barisic, even Alfredo Morelos, they've not really won that much in their careers comparatively. So it's important to sort of like give it our all in cup competition because realistically, that's our only chance of getting silverware this season. Not to say that I'm trying to dial it in for the week, but just realistically at this point, it's probably more likely that we'll have cup success and week success. But to build up that habit is important, and to sort of add sort of trophies and medals to the collection, it will give the squad confidence. I think it'll sort of give them more desire, hopefully, to go and achieve some more. So, yeah, definitely, I think hopefully the Scottish Cup success last season will have left a mark on the squad. Yeah,
I totally agree with you there. It can only you need that winning mentality, and the only way you can get into that is by winning stuff, I suppose. So yeah, I hope it continues. Patrick, I'll come to you on the next question. Another point that Beale raised in the press conference was he talked about. He gave us some injury updates. I think it might have been Derek Clark who's appeared a couple of times on this. Asked about Ridvan and Lawrence. I think he gave us an update of Ridvan being back in 3 to 4 weeks. In what capacity, I'm not too sure. I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that Lawrence was in isolated rehab. That maybe suggests it's a bit worse than we initially anticipated. And he's given that a definitive date for Yanis Hadji returning on the St Johnstone game. I believe he also had John Suter in that category as well. How important is it going to be to have 4 effectively, and I hate saying it because it's so cliched, but they're going to be like new signings coming into the squad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's good to have a surplus of players to choose from. He's mentioned, I think he's used this word extensively in almost all the press conferences since he's been back. He's going to use the full squad, and I think that's probably best. He's at the capacity in his Rangers career as a coach where he needs to decide who he wants to keep on. And that list is increasingly getting slimmer, it seems, as the months roll on, which I think a lot of people will want to see. And that's almost a lot of people feel is a prerequisite for success. They'd mentioned how lots of faces will change this summer in the press conference today as well. And I think that's to music to a lot of people's ears. And that's with the greatest respect to a few of the players. But I think with these players returning for injury, it's probably more important in the sense that we get to see what they look like in a Beale team for pretty much an audition for their future, as opposed to oh yes, these 4 players are back, we're going to romp to the league, because that's just unrealistic and a pipe dream at best. Sadly, at least that's just my opinion on it. But I think it's good to see these players play in combination with others. We will have never seen Hadji play with Tillman, for example.
Yeah.
We'll really never seen Sakala and Yilmaz and Kent together for many extensive minutes. So it'll just be nice to see where we are, where the status quo will be in January or in June rather, and who we can plan for. Because if Hadji comes back and he shows the form that he showed in the 2021 season, in the 55 season, where he got like 10 goals and 8 assists and was fantastic, then he's put down as a key player for the coming season. But then he might also return with the form he had pre-injury, and then we have questions about him. Do we want to sell him? And much like the same with Suter, if we see the John Suter we saw at Hearts, it'd be fantastic. And then the questions would just be, how are we going to actually maintain his fitness? And that's a question regardless, I guess, to be fair. But yeah, it will be good to see what we have to sort of review and evaluate who we have in-house. And then the next step is to see perhaps contract extensions and the squad planning thereon.
Yeah, it's very... I'm dying to ask you this, because I've noticed that in nearly every single press conferences, he mentions John Suter, Patrick. What do you think Suter's role will be in this squad? I mean, will he be there purely for rotational purposes, or do you think that he will, if fit, merit a starting position? Because I'm not too sure myself, given how well Davies and Goldson have done, but he seems very, very keen on John Suter.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I don't obviously injuries, availability is the best ability beyond any sort of ball playing or defensive ability. You have to be actually able to play. I remember when he signed, if we looked at the numbers, I do some rating systems on like the 7 key traits for centre backs, and if we looked at centre backs in the leagues between the Holland and I think it was the 20th best league, so it might have been Croatia, he had the best ranking of all centre backs last season. He was in a perfect situation because Hearts, they defend enough so that his stats are good, but they also have enough possession that his passing stats are really good. But yeah, he's a right footer, and he's not that great on the left, so he's going to have to usurp Goldson's place, and that's just an impossible task. So I think realistically, the best thing he does is operate as a sixth man, is what we call it in basketball. Basketball, 5 players start, but the best sub gets the same amount of minutes as all the starters almost. Around when the year finishes, they play as much as the other 5 starters. So I think what we might see is, I guess, what we saw in the 55 season, where Helander, Balogun, and Goldson were almost all playing and splitting the minutes. That's obviously the best circumstance, but obviously we have to see him come back. In his sort of short cameos he's shown for Rangers, he was playing, as Beale had mentioned, actually, retrospectively, he was playing with injections in his knee against Livingston, and he wasn't great, but then Joel New plays a handful for a lot of centre-backs. But the best case scenario is that he comes in and he's a fully fledged rotation option, pushing for the starting spot. And we all say, oh, wow, if he played for any team but Rangers and Scotland, he'd start. That would be ideal. And at worst, he's a name to satisfy the Scottish criteria in the UEFA list. And I know a lot of people on Twitter have been talking about the need for that. And I think it's overblown to an extent. But that's why I felt in the summer signing him for no transfer fee was a no-brainer, even with the reality that he was going to have these injuries issues. And we have to remember he's signed up for 4 years. And we always knew he was going to be injured for a bit. And I think it was almost comical timing that he got injured straight away. But if he was to go on and have, let's say, he's got 3 years left, or he's got 3.5 years left on his contract, and if 2.5 of those years are injury-free, we'd look back and say 65% availability would have taken that when he signed. So I think he's definitely one of those longer-term options and sustainability. But in the short term, he needs to come back and show that he's able to sort of disrupt that good partnership that seems to be flourishing so far.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot to dislodge either Davies or Goldson from the first team at the moment. But as you mentioned there, I can see him being a good rotational option. He just seems to fit into that. I know we've mentioned it quite a lot on this podcast about he's a Beale type player. I seem to say that about everybody, but he is a Beale type player in terms that he's, you know, quite physical, can defend, but as you said, his passing stats are very, very good. Dylan, I'll come to you on the next question here. It was I thought this was quite interesting, the way that Beale handled this question. It was the comments that Aberdeen captain Anthony Stewart made that he would prefer to play against Antonio Cholak over Alfredo Morelos. What did you make of these quite I don't know, crazy comments, very unprofessional from the Aberdeen player. I would say I can't believe that he got baited at answering something like this at a press conference. But credit to Beale, he said, "I'll give the guys due. I haven't seen it, but I'm not too sure how much I believe in that." But what did you make of the comments from Anthony Stewart? And surely that's all you need to do is just get a set of AirPods, put them in Alfredo's ear, and put that on repeat.
Yeah, there's like been up in the dressing room as well. Yeah, I think I can maybe get what you're saying, but yeah, I'm still quite surprised that he has came out with something like that, especially with Rafael else over the years. He's sort of thinking about the amount of times that he has done it against Aberdeen, whether it's scoring goals or assisting. Yeah, it's quite a ridiculous comment to make, especially right before a semi-final. But as you said, hopefully Alfie could just sort of use that as inspiration almost. I can imagine for most of us, if someone were to say that, but the first thing you want to do is prove them wrong. So you're just kind of hoping that Alfie just sort of takes note, as it were, and just shows him how it's done.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting if Morelos starts, and I'm sure Anthony will start as well. So it'll be very good. I'll look very forward to that situation. Patrick, what was your thoughts on comments like that getting made? And yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Given your opposition motivation before such an important game.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the honesty though. He was asked a question, he answered it, and I mean, I guess it's one that he'll live and die by. If he goes and pockets whoever plays up top, they'll be the sort of like confident boss who knew it was going to happen. And if we score a hat trick or Cholak and Morelos, ideally both score, that'd be great. And then he couldn't handle either of them. But I kind of liked it. And I think obviously it's perhaps the best time to pick on Morelos. He's not exactly playing well. He's getting pelters from all angles, even from our own, and rightfully so. He's getting paid a lot of money. He's on the sort of precipice of extend his contract. He's probably demanding a high fee given what he's given to us in the past, but he's certainly not the player that he was, I guess, this time last year when he had that sort of mini remontada under Van Bronckhorst, or even 2 or 3 years ago. I remember this morning someone posted a clip of him when he scored the brace against Hearts in the Premier Sports Cup semi-final. I think it was 3 years ago. And it's night and day, not just in conditioning, because I think that gets ripped on that a bit too much, but just in general demeanor. But I expect we'll see Morelos start. I don't think you would see Cholak go in after the bump he got against Dundee United. And if we're being honest, Morelos added a bit of an extra dimension against Dundee United. That might be a bit of confirmation bias, just because the whole team played better in the second half. But you'd think the gravity that he sort of attracts from the defenders would have had a bit of an input into us playing better in that second half. But I would not be surprised if we see both play. That's what I think. But not at start. Just one will get subbed on for each other.
Oh, don't set me up like that. I'm absolutely dying to see the Cholak Morelos team up front. I've been panned for it a few times in the comments. I know Big Gav was having a go at me on Wednesday for daring to suggest such a thing. But Dylan, look, I'll come to you on the very, very last point with Beale's press conference. Is that I kind of touched on it a wee bit earlier, but how do you feel about his honesty in these press conferences? Patrick, obviously, they were talking about the Aberdeen captain that he did. He found it refreshing that someone is as honest as that. But do you think at times he gives a wee bit too much away, or do you think that I love the new press conferences, the fact that they're 20 minutes long, but sometimes I do think he is maybe a wee bit too honest about things. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's probably just because we were too used to how Giovanni Van Bronckhorst did his press conferences, where he didn't really give that much away. Probably just because he has been media trained for that long, that he's been instructed to sort of answer questions as quickly as possible without giving too much detail away. But I'm kind of like you, Kyle, on that. It is quite refreshing to sort of see Michael Beale do the press conferences. I think you can tell that he has a lot of passion for the game, and he is so enthusiastic to talk about it. I think it's sort of worth bearing in mind that this is really his, last few months is really the first time that he has become, the main man at the club, the manager. So I think there's certainly some learning curves for him, because I think I can remember maybe Steven Gerrard when he first came over, when he was quite brutally honest in post press conferences, and and in his interviews. So, but again, I don't think it's detrimental. I think all I just see is a person who enjoys his job, loves talking about his job. But I can sort of see why a lot of people might not be big fans of it, because I think he does go into the exact detail. But again, I think he'll sort of learn to curve it in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That you can tell he's very, very early on in his managerial career, and you know that I will say that the last two managers we've had were top class international football players, and you know they had media training to maybe, you know, not reveal so much, but I do agree with you guys. I do think it is refreshing to see so much honesty in a game where it is, you know, cloak and daggers, and it's, you know, information's hidden and kept behind and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good. Look, Patrick, I'll come to you in the next point. We'll touch on the TAV press conference. There was lots to take away from this. He was quite stoic. Was our captain here? He didn't give an awful lot away, but I thought it was interesting that he said that under Michael Beale so far, that he perhaps felt that the Dundee United game was the best performance, which I found a bit odd given how poor they were in that first half. And then he talked about the Aberdeen game specifically, and he talked about how that was a game that they felt that they took risks in, more risks than they have in other games. And they certainly got the reward for that. I'm sure I don't need anybody to say that it was it was 3 minutes or 5 minutes of injury time, and we got the 2 goals in it. But do you think that's something that this Rangers team need to do more of under Michael Beale, as take more risks going forward, and that transition from it being Gio's team to Beale's team? Are you seeing that sort of coming into effect so far?
I mean, I guess to an extent, I would say, given our sort of financial and just total mass mismatch against all of the other teams in Scotland, that we should be a team that makes risks. You want mostly calculated risks, but we can afford to sort of send 7 men forward and try and outscore the other team. Obviously, a lot of people like to comment that sort of championships and titles are won by tight backlines, but I do think in Scotland it's a lot easier to score a goal or two and make up for scoring them than conceding them, just because, as is, we've already conceded 20 and 21, and we have a defence. If you look at the individuals, perhaps besides our goalie, who you'd want in the sort of, if you selected all of the teams, you'd want Goldson in your defence, and even still we're conceding. So it's a lot easier to score, and that also correlates with taking risks. He also mentioned that they're playing with more freedom. That might just be like on the basis of positional play. They're allowed to drift a bit more. Kent, I think, is the perfect example of this. He now almost is positionless. He just assumes that sort of central 10 role and just does a lot of roaming, which works well for him. But then some players are better in a sort of more structured environment, which they're told, you'll take this side, counter press to this person. But each player is receptive to different things. So someone like Tav and Kent and Sakala specifically have all seemed to be profited off Beale's more sort of laissez-faire approach, which works for players like them. They like to be on the ball. They know what to do. They're technically inclined. But then some others might respond better to a sort of more regimented thing. But we'll see. And Beale will be aware of that, and he'll sort of game plan for the person. He's mentioned a lot when he's been talking about the transfers that he wants a person here. They're not just players, and to fit his mindset to the goals. So they're all kind of trending upwards to the same extent. He mentioned that he wants the players to sort of mirror his coaching team, who are all young and hungry and looking to just take the next step and not leave Rangers to a better team per se, but to sort of take us to glory and then eventually go to the upper echelons of football, which is just a sort of natural reality of us. And I guess against Aberdeen in the League Cup, there'll be some sort of security in the idea that you want to play it slow because of the occasion. And we've talked about winning trophies and the lack thereof in the last few years, but I think the best way we can do it is kind of just go all guns blazing. We kind of played 50-50 to Aberdeen for the first half a few weeks back, and it didn't really go well. I think the way we're able to beat them, or obviously not the way, but what I would do is just go and take sort of maximize our advantages, and that is in the forward lines. They have a few good striker forwards. Duke's been playing quite well. Miovski is a good penalty box striker, but the way we win this is by scoring early and sort of putting the game to bed. It's a lot easier said than done, and we've had quite a few classics over the last few years. I wouldn't be surprised if Morelos and Stewart get into something, maybe a red card. I remember the classic double red card between McKenna and Morelos, which must have been like 2.5 years ago. I don't want that. Maybe I'll take that if we're up 5-0 and Morelos is back the hat-trick, and then he can get a red card. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Patrick has got Morelos down for scoring a hat-trick at the weekend.
And the red card. The odds probably quite good for that as well.
Yeah, you're probably going to get decent odds on that as well. Look, Dylan, I'll come to you for the next point in the TAV press conference. I thought there was a really good question. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was from, but it was talking about TAV actually having, the same consistent players ahead of him, especially in this Beale system. He's gone with Sakala and Tillman out in that right hand side. TAV talks about it. It is nice, you become more familiar with the patterns of play and where people are going and stuff like that. How important do you think it is when we do get players back from injury, keeping them fit and keeping them in the team for just a bit of consistency?
Massive, absolutely massive. As you sort of alluded to, it gives them more opportunity to get to know one another in terms of their play, how they fit into the system, how they react to the system. Just as simple as that, when they have the ball, they'll know what that person will be, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's absolutely crucial. I think the fact that the lineup got dropped to James before World Cup break probably didn't help the form at all, especially when coming back after the World Cup break where he had a centre back pairing of Lundstrom and Sands. So again, you can you can only do so much when everybody around you are just dropping like flies, and you're just kind of like a new partner every game, every 2 games, every 3 games. So yeah, absolutely. And in an ideal world, it would be good to have all the players fit and available, but unfortunately, as we've seen from this season, we're not in an ideal world. We will always have like at least 1 or 2 players that we'd like to make an impact, albeit on the sidelines. That's the only thing. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I think we lost Kyle there.
That's all right.
He's back.
Okay, he's back. Thank goodness. I felt like Dav there when the centre backs went on sidelines.
No, that was all right. That was an unexpected click of a button in my mouse there that I forgot was there. So there you go. I could just see the look of panic on your face there, Dylan, for coming back. But yeah, so sorry. Had you finished speaking about the having the consistent players in the team there?
Yeah, I think it was just more or less the point that in an ideal world, we would have the likes of like a Hadji or a Lawrence, players of that caliber available at squad at any given moment. But obviously, I think every club in the world at least have that one player on the sidelines that they wish was in their starting 11, or at least have the option of on the bench. So yeah, it's going to be important, but again, we just need to make use of the situation, really.
Look, Dylan, I'll stick with you in this so far. I know it might be a bit harsh on Tav, but my opinion is that he's not been great defensively this season, and normally that's kind of what we say offset by the amount of assists, amount of goals. Has he scored 100 goals and assists or something like that for outrageous? I'm sure Patrick will be able to tell us better on that one, but the stats are absolutely outrageous for him. But how do you think he's done so far this season? And do you think that have you seen a bit of an improvement under Beale? Because I somebody we'll come on to next is Adam Devine, but he mentioned that in his press conference that it's really good to have somebody like Devine brought in or there to challenge them. Again, so I'll go back to the Beale press conference as well. He's talked about training and it wanting it to be competitive and everything to be them again, getting them into that winner's mentality. First of all, basically, how well would you rate Tav this season? How do you think he's done under Beale? And do you think it's good that Devine's challenging him?
Yeah, to answer the first question, I think he's been all right, but obviously the last few seasons he has been, arguably our best player in terms of stats. The fact that he's always there to be counted, almost. But again, it's kind of as I alluded to the question before. It's probably just due to the fact that players around him are dropping like flies. The confidence in the squad was more or less shattered, I thought, after the Champions League and the first Old Firm game of the season. So again, it was quite a lot for them to pick themselves back up. And also, it's kind of like what we believed that he wasn't fully fit, at least right before the World Cup break, where it just sort of felt like Gio was just forcing him to play at points. Maybe not in that wording, but it certainly did feel as if he couldn't be rested because there was no one that could sort of step up. And so, what was your two other questions, Kyle?
Just basically, do you think you've seen a bit of an improvement under since Michael Beale's come back in, and just how important is it to have guys like Devine pushing Tav in at the first team?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, I think I have seen a slight improvement. Again, he still does mistakes. I mean, one that sticks out to me most is in the New Year Old Firm game when I thought he could have done better for the first goal, but I do see a bit more improvement. I think the players around him have got a bit more confidence, so therefore he gets a bit more confidence, because I've always believed that Dav, when he's around better players, is a better player himself. So I think the fact that he's got that consistency a bit more with Beale has definitely helped him. And yeah, it's quite good to sort of see Define behind him, because I think from what we've seen, he has sort of impressed me, especially when he's been playing as a left back, which it's not his natural position, but I thought he'd done a good job. I think as well as another option for us for if it's like a run-of-the-mill week game or it's a cup game against like a smaller opposition, then you can have confidence to chuck on and Define and give Dav that bit more rest, because he has sort of, I think, run himself into the ground a wee bit in the last couple of seasons. But yeah, it's quite good that we've got not only someone who can cover for that, but also the fact that he's come from our academy, really.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Patrick, I'll come to you on the next point here. Basically, it's about the transfers. Let's just go into it and see what's going on, because I know this is you're a bit of an expert in all things like this. My first question for you is Todd Cantwell. It looks very, very, very likely that we are going to sign him. Sky Sports News reporting now, that tends to be an indication of, that it's at maybe at the advanced stages and some of the absolute hints that that Beale was dropping in the press conference today. Where do you see a guy like Cantwell fitting into the Rangers system, and how do you think he will cope if we do end up signing him?
Yeah, I mean, he's mainly played as a left winger or sort of left attacking mid for Norwich in like a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, which are two shapes we play often. But I don't see him playing there per se. I would more likely see him playing in the midfield three as either like a sort of number 10 or number 8. Think of where Hadji or Lowry or Lawrence or Tillman would play. Not to say I think he would come in and probably he'd be on the wages that would require him to start, but I think you could start him across with one of those more attacking players against sort of the majority of teams. But I think you want him as a 10 or a left wing against better teams, just because we can't carry that many sort of offensive players in Europe or against Celtic per se. His skill set's fairly interesting. Obviously, a lot of it was made of him like 2 or 3 years ago. I think he got 6 goals, 5 assists in the Premier League, the English Premier League, and was destined to join Liverpool or something like that. So he's got a really high ceiling. The skill doesn't just evaporate. It's probably a mix of confidence, and sort of that Norwich team weren't very good outside of that season. In the Championship in 2021, he was also quite good, but he's not really got a goal-scoring touch per se. He obviously knows where the goal is, as almost all forwards do. But outside of that one season in the Premier League, he hasn't put together a campaign where he's scored consistently, especially for a left winger. We've had our own problems with left wingers who don't really score much but contribute in other ways with Kent. And he can carry his value outside of not scoring because he just does so much. But I don't think people will probably get tired if we have another player like that on the wing. But I think he would be more valuable in the centre, because we also don't have that many great contributing bodies there. Tillman's been fantastic recently. And then Lawrence and Hadji are injured, so we need to wait upon how they return. And then Arfield, he's good for a goal when you sub him on, but I don't think people are that confident in his ability to sort of carry and play the ball and sort of complete and execute a full 90 minutes at a high level. But he is great for like an odd 30 minutes against Aberdeen. Was the perfect example. Him come on and score a few goals. So he has a high ceiling. Like his potential is there. Beale has talked about rehabbing players, and I think this is probably the sort of prototypical example of getting someone who has the capabilities and sort of the technical base to come here and boss the league and rehabbing them to a point where we can sell them on in a year or two for 10, 15 million. He's got all the hallmarks of someone in the Premier League signing him if it goes right. But a few of those ones we've seen with Ramsey and Diallo trying to rehab them, albeit completely different players and only on loan, those didn't work that well. And we've all seen a few in years past as well. But I think if we pay a low fee, I think the risk is worth it just because there is a sort of plethora of evidence, both data and video-wise, that he has skills that a few in the sort of team have. He has a natural fit, or a fit, at least I see, being quite good in the side as well. One problem would be the fact that a lot of the Norwich fans are complaining about sort of a lack of intensity and the fact that there's a sort of misnomer and discrepancy between his numbers looking good, or at least the underlying ones, and the fans thinking he doesn't play well. And we have quite a few players like that at Rangers already. So I don't really want for us to carry another like quantity guy who doesn't appeal with fans. But I think if we bring him in, let's say, Beale said Monday, we might see someone come in. If it's sub 1.5 million and he's on decent wages, I think it's a risk definitely worth taking. And either it'll be a massive success or it'll be a big failure and we'll want him out in 6 months. But I don't really see much in between. But at this point, optimism, I think he could really succeed, but it's far from a guarantee.
Yeah, you totally stole the next question right out of my mouth there about to see what fee you would ask for him. But yeah, are you trying to tell me that the Rangers fans would turn in someday if they have a couple of poor games? Well, I never, Patrick. Dylan, look, I'll come to you in the next bit of transfer news that Michael Beale alluded to in his press conference today. We touched a wee bit about it on the Wednesday pod there. Alex Lowry, he was pretty definitive that he is not going out on loan. Obviously, there was that rumour that circulated about him going up to potentially Ross County, but I have seen today that it looks like they've brought in another couple of midfielders. And the fact that Beale said he's not going out on loan. What do you think? Do you think this is the right move to keep Lowry in the squad and have him in and around guys that are playing in the first team, or do you think that he would benefit from going out and playing on loan somewhere?
I think it's a right move for him to stay at Rangers if he gets the game time. I think Michael Beale also alluded to the fact that he's hoping to give Robbie McCrory some game time as well. So it's sort of that reassurance that he at least wants to give the youth a chance, because obviously he's come from youth coaching himself at Liverpool. So I think he's always keen to sort of give them an opportunity. I can see why people are mixed about potentially him going out alone, but I think what I'll maintain is that he's far too good for the B team in the Lowland weeks. I think that's evident with the fact that he scored a hat-trick during the week against Civil Strollers. So now he's kind of in that hinterland of like, well, what do we do with him now? I think it would be useful to have him around the club just so he could get more used to the system. And he might not play a lot of games from now till the end of the season, but he'll at least get some opportunities to sort of get used to the system, improve like his decision making as well when on the ball. So, and the only reason why I probably would like to see him go on is if there's a guarantee that he won't get that many minutes staying here. So therefore, I think it would be beneficial for him to go to a club like Ross County where he will be one of like the main players, like he'd be one of the main men that they look to. So I'll give him experience with that, but I don't think there's really any negatives, to be honest, with him sticking around the club, because I think he will get opportunities here and there, and hopefully he takes it as it comes.
Yeah, I agree with you there, 100%, Dylan. I think it was Gav that raised a good point. He asked us to name the last outfield player at Rangers that had a successful loan spell and came back and was integrated in the first team, and Charlie Adam was the name that was touted, so we know that was circa about 2006, 2007. Patrick, I'll come to you for sort of one last transfer question here. It's number one. It's a wee question about the other player that we seem to have been linked with purely because Beale's mentioned his name. It occurred to me on Wednesday that Everton still owe us a bit of cash. I think it's circa 3.5 million. What's your thoughts on a guy like Tom Davies potentially, or Davis, I should say, signing for Rangers? And I'll leave the floor entirely up to you. Is there any other areas that you think we should be looking at? Is there any players that you think Rangers should be going out and snapping up in the January transfer window?
I mean, at least if we're looking at Tom Davies, I wouldn't want to renegotiate the Patterson fee. I don't think he's worth 3.5 million, especially on that 6-month deal. And I'd rather just have the cash in hand, as that's something that cash flow is important, especially in football. And looking to the summer window, we'll need a lot of sort of free capital to buy players, hopefully, knock on wood. With Davies, I don't know as much as Cantwell. I think that's indicative of the fact he hasn't played much recently. He had 2 good seasons in 1920 and 2021. But we need to preface those were good for a teenager in the Premier League, which is still mightily impressive. And that's a really good rating. But he's really stagnated, if not sort of fallen back since then. Injured quite extensively with a knee injury last year. And he's probably now better known for his sort of sense of style and the appearances he makes on red carpets in football. But not to say there isn't skill there. He'd probably come in and play as a sort of deepest sitting player, like a 6. He seems to be pretty good on the ball and in tight spaces, plays it forward, quite an accurate passer. But I think this is wholly dependent on the fee in the basis that at his age, and with the questions around him, not say at his age, he's 24, but he hasn't played football like a 24-year-old. He's probably more akin to a 21-year-old, so there's still have questions. But he has trained in a professional environment, Everton, and a top-level one under Ancelotti, and a plethora of good coaches, despite the sort of cluster and confusion Everton are now. They still have good players he's come out against in training. But I don't know if his skill set versus sort of your average 6 is worth paying that much money for, because he's just good at the basics. And that's probably what we need at the defensive midfielder. I think that's more what Stephen Davis is great at. He'll give you 7 out of 10 every game. But I think we're at the point in which there are too many questions for us to spend more than, let's say, over 1.5, especially considering the fact that you could get him for free in 6 months, but that knee injury is clouding a lot of the vision for me. It's one that I wouldn't be angry if we get him. I wouldn't be sad. I don't think it's a bad link per se, but obviously I haven't watched much of him, and the numbers are quite difficult because he's playing for a pretty poor EPL team, and to sort of translate those numbers into a good SPL team is quite difficult, just because it's like, oh wow, you don't defend very well, but you're having to defend against like De Bruyne, whereas here you'd have to defend with the greatest respect, St. Mirren and Motherwell. So if I wouldn't pick him per se. He wouldn't be on my short list, but that's to say, if Beale likes him, that's probably the best co-sign. And obviously, if he's one that he's talked to, I think Onoma was another mention. Josh Onoma from Fulham, who we mentioned that we're actually talking with him. His numbers are a lot better, but again, he's also had injury problems. And I think in his career, he's 25 now, and he is yet to put up a season with over 2,500 minutes, which is akin roughly to like 25 full 90s, which is another concern because we play so many games and we'd have so many injured players or players who are prone to injury. That what we need to build is, when we sort of break this up in the summer, we need to build it not with just good players, but solid, stable pieces in which we can depend on them to play in Europe, in Scotland, in the Cup and all that. And those are obviously difficult to find at a good price, but I think we need to equally take risks with players like Cantwell and Davies and get Beale to rehab, because he seems to love the idea of building up these projects, and that's awesome. I like to hear that, but we also need to have the more stable, which doesn't mean boring in any sense or cheap, because to sort of get a player who satisfies all the basics and is sort of available for 90% of the games is expensive, and that'll be the challenge. But it'll be interesting to hear, because obviously Beale's talked about 3 or 4 names, and we've only really heard murmurs of one really solid one, which is Cantwell. Obviously Davies and Onoma have been discussed, but it still does leave a few more names to sort of unravel post the Aberdeen game. So hopefully on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, we're sort of deloading from a good victory against Aberdeen, and hopefully who we know will play in the Cup finals, and we'll get some interesting names linked.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I hate to put you in the spot, Patrick, but is there anybody that you think that we should be looking at that we're not looking at the moment?
I mean, I don't know, because we're not privy to all the money and stuff. But like, I guess if you're looking at the main thing, so if you're like, oh, why we should be looking at this person, I guess, is if you look at the contract situation of someone like Campbell and Davies have 6 months left on their deal, and that's always a good way to go. Obviously, Raskin was talked about, but he's probably a bit too good. He'll have like links to players like, or teams like Marseille has been linked, and you're not going to join Rangers over Marseille. It's not the 90s anymore. Sadly, I'd love us to be up there fighting with teams like that. But I not off the top of my head, I guess we really need to see, I think we're more so in the situation of who leaves. I know Beale mentioned that no one's going to leave in January, which I think is probably a mistake. Obviously, if no one's going to buy a player, we don't just want to rip their contract up. But
yeah,
I think the best thing we can do is sort of break it down and see what we can do in the summer, just because it is really difficult to get good players in January, because if they're good and their team's fighting for the league, they're not going to sell them. If they're good and they're fighting to stay up, they're not going to sell them. So it's really this sort of Goldilocks area where you want to find players who are good but not important enough to their team, who are also sort of destined for mediocrity. And at that point, you're finding like maybe one or two players if even that. But so I can't really answer your question.
No, I think that was a fair enough answer. I think you are right. That is the market that Rangers now have to shop in. That they are looking at the players that are, questioning their options, and they've got that 6 months left in their deal. You're right. It's a good way of putting it. That sort of Goldilocks zone. Look, Dylan, I'll come to you on one last question before we move on to the Aberdeen game at the weekend. I noticed a wee bit of noise about it in social media. I don't know if I put it in my agenda in the group, but I don't know if you've seen it. But it's to do with this patrons package for Edmondson House. Yeah. So right. Okay. You must have seen it then. So. Yeah, so like I said, I totally understand that it's clearly a way of the club of raising a bit of capital. I would hedge my bets in saying that this is a Bizgrove idea. That it sounds like it's something to him that he would come up with. I get it. We need, they're charging £50,000. I said I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it is, but you seem to be getting events to Edmondson House. You seem to be getting, part of the sort of board of patrons for Edmondson House, tickets for some concerts. You have I think you've got 2 tickets for the director's box. I do notice that this is invitation only, but the one thing on it that does seem like a wee bit of a kick in the stones to a lot of supporters is this lifetime gold membership that's included in it. What's your overall thoughts on something like this? Is this just something that we need to shut up and stop moaning about because it is a relatively easy way to raise capital, or is this just the board of sort of not messed it up again, but just missed the mark?
Yeah, again, like I've only kind of just seen it, so I've not really read into the finer details of it. So I don't think it'd be fair for me to sort of fully comment on it. Mm-hmm. I think it's just. On the basis of it, it's probably just a way for club to raise some more funds, which is never really a bad thing, because obviously you can remember back in the lower division days when we can even swap out Sports Direct because we know for a fact that the money we spent in that shop won't go to the clubs. So it's quite nice now to see the kind of board exploring other avenues to raise funds. It's not a particularly, I'm not going to say it's a great look, especially in a season where we charged such a high price for the Champions Week package, and then obviously last season when the Celtic friendly happened. So yeah, again, I'm not too sure what to say, but again, I can see why people like myself can just see that it's another way for a club to raise money, but also I can see on the other hand that fans do feel as if they're being cascaded by the board.
Yeah, for 50 grand, I'd want Glenn Kamara playing in my 5-a-side team every week for that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I can see what it is. It'll be interesting to see how many of these are actually issued out, and I'm sure it's something that we will never know. But I can understand everything else, but for me, the lifetime gold membership, it's a wee bit of a kick in the teeth, especially for guys that are. I mean, some of the amount of money that people have ploughed in for something like that and go to games week in, week out, it just seems like a way to bypass that. But I'm sure we'll discuss it in another pod at some point. Patrick, I'll come to you. Let's talk about nearly an hour into the podcast. Let's talk about the game against Aberdeen. Obviously, huge occasion. What do you think? How do you think the game will go? How do you think Rangers will line up in that game?
I mean, I don't think we'll see much difference at all to the team that we saw against Dundee United or Celtic. I think the only questions will be Morelos or Cholak, and I think it's fairly obvious Morelos will start just because I don't think you throw in a striker who's sort of half-baked. And even then, probably not in his greatest form, albeit he hit the heights early on, and it's quite difficult to sort of complain that he's not continuing to score a goal every single 90 minutes. But I think we'll probably sort of set up in the prototypical 4-3-3, maybe 4-3-1-2, Sakala, Morelos, Kent, and then Tillman, Kamara, Lundstrom, or Jack maybe. Jack did impress against Dundee United, so it might be difficult to take him out. We might just go with a bit extra security given the fact that it's the sort of game we're playing. It's a semi-final, but we should play the opponent, not the occasion. And obviously Aberdeen were probably as good as us for 89 minutes at Protodry 3 weeks ago, which isn't much of a compliment to them because we were really poor. But I feel like since that, we've shown sort of 90 minutes of solid football. I mean, now probably 180, I guess. The entirety of the Motherwell game was quite good without us ever catching fire. But we've shown two really good halves, one against Celtic, one against Dundee United. And it seems that we're just a game away from putting it together and having a solid 90 minutes. And I think this might be the perfect example given the occasion. And that the fact that we've been quite good in these semi-finals of past. Obviously, the Hibs one last year was one to look away from, but Hearts in 2 years, so we can take experience from that and hopefully replicate that. And I see no reason why we couldn't. Aberdeen are also not in a great spot. There seems to be quite a lot of pressure both on the manager and the players. So if we can just add sort of put that up a notch and make the pressure cooker a bit hotter, that'll be nice for us. Both given that the sort of rivals and for us to sort of laugh at them, but also means we're also in the finals.
Yeah, that's exactly. And Dylan, how do you see the game going, and how important is it for Rangers to win a cup this year under Beale?
Yeah, well, it might be a semi-final for us, but it's a cup final for Aberdeen, unfortunately, with the way these things go. I've not really got too much to add on to what Patrick's already said. But it's quite an important game, I think, for Beale because it's sort of a chance to sort of win a trophy really early on in his Rangers career and his career in general, to be honest. So, yeah, it's important because hopefully then we can sort of build on from that. Hopefully win Scottish Cup up again and then just use that as momentum for next season when hopefully Beale can add some more signings to the side and then we can just sort of take it from there.
Yeah, and can I get a wee predicted lineup from you there, Dylan? Who do you think will start?
Yeah, so I think McLaughlin will start. I think he's sort of like the designated cup goalkeeper. Although I wouldn't be surprised if even in the week he will chop and change. Backline, I'm just going to go for your typical to have Goldson, Davies, Barisic. That probably is the best back four, minus Yilmaz, in my opinion. In midfield, I'll probably go for Lundstrom and Jack and Tillman. I think Jack had a good game against Dundee United, especially in the second half last time round. So hopefully he keeps it up. And then up front, Sakala, Alfie, and Ken, because I think Sakala's definitely staked that right wing as his own for the time being. He's on good form. So, yeah, with that team, I'm quite confident that we can do the business against Aberdeen.
Yeah, Patrick, that's a question I'm keen to ask you as well. How key has Sakala been since Beale's coming in? Because he looks like a totally different player at times. I know he touched on him in the press conference and he talked about him, how he tries and how he's in good form. But how important could he potentially be at the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously sort of has sort of upped it recently. I don't know if I'm going to say upped it because he's always shown this in sort of spurts, but I guess he's put it together for a more extended period. It used to be 5 or 10 minutes of good play over a 90, but now it's looking more like 45. There's still a ways to go. He still can probably yet to put together a full 90 has been really impressive, but it's sort of the player he is. And if he was able to do that, he wouldn't be a Rangers, and I think we all know that. But yeah, I guess it's just the sort of threat from the right wing, which you haven't had consistently in what seems like forever. So when we have any semblance of sort of consistency, and we've seen Sakala for I think since Beale took over, he's got 5 goal contributions in 6 games. So we're seeing some sort of consistent output from him, which is important. It provides some symmetry to our attack because for far too often they could just throw the left back or the right back and the right centre back on Kent. The left centre back would rotate over and sort of leave our right winger open and double up on Kent, and that would sort of sever us totally creatively, and then it would force our centre mids to create, and they're not exactly the best place to do that outside of maybe Tillman. So yeah, I think it provides a lot of balance to the team. It also allows Tav to overlap with more ferocity because you can sort of bank on someone actually having to take Sakala as to him sort of standing off. Because one thing Sakala, when he does well, he takes a lot of shots. Not always the best shots. So even when he's posted up outside, and when it looks like he should cross, he might take the shots. So they've got to stay tight on him, which allows Tav some freedom. He can pass it into the byline, and boom, we've got a fantastic opportunity. So yeah, I think Sakala's increase in form long may it last. It's great for the fans, but I think it provides a sort of assurance and symmetry to the team as a whole. And you really wouldn't think about right wing being such an important leveler for the other 10 players, but I think it's at the point where that has been the largest gaping hole. And we've almost compensated for so long to have some sort of resemblance to normality. It's going to see a lot of players profit. None more than Sakala probably though.
Yeah, 100%. It's I think my seat's actually in row ZZ in Hampden, so I'll take my goalie gloves just in case there's a couple of way-on shots that I can catch there, Patrick. Dylan, before we go, let's get a wee predicted scoreline off you.
Yeah, going to be quite tough, but I'm going to go for 2-0. I'll go for Alfie to score both goals.
Oh, that would just be lovely, wouldn't it? And Patrick, yourself, how do you think what do you think the score will be in the game?
I think we'll win 3-1. I'll go with Sakala, Morelos, Tillman goals.
Oh, yes, I'd take that as well. Every time we play Aberdeen, I hope it's about 5 or 6-0. But I said as long as we win on Sunday, that's all that matters to me. That's about it for tonight. That was another good show, guys. Thanks very much, Dylan.
My pleasure, mate.
And thanks very much, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No bother. Take care, everybody. Just remember, give us a like and subscribe, and we will be back on Sunday at 8 o'clock with the post-match reaction to the semi-final in the League Cup. See you all then, and take care, everybody.